What's up, guys? Today we have a game review submitted by our very own Ryan K5, KF5. Okay, so he's rated 1781. He's a strong player. He's up against Mr. Messi, who's almost a 2000, 1971. So about 200 points higher than him. So this is an uphill challenge. 15-10 game. So we have the black pieces. And Ryan's message with this game was he didn't know exactly what went wrong. He's high enough rated that some games he'll have the problem where you didn't just blunder a piece, it's not so obvious how you ended up in a worse position when all your moves seem to make sense. So this is a really cool opportunity to look at a game like that that was not decided by blunders. So let's take a look. White opens with e4. Makes perfect sense. Ryan responds with e5. Now, I haven't played e5 myself, I don't know, in ages. So, I don't know theory, so I'm just going to give you based on, what I see. So white develops the knight. Black develops the knight. Fine. White can go into a bunch of different openings. So white chooses to go into the Scotch game. So by putting this pawn here, black basically has to take. He doesn't really have any other really good alternatives that don't give white some sort of advantage. White has two strong pawns in the center. We need to get rid of one of them. We definitely don't want him kicking our well-placed knight. Okay, so Ryan takes it. So white's probably going to recapture, and he does. Okay, so Ryan goes knight of 6. Now, this is the Scotch game, and if you're playing it, you probably know theory or watch videos or stuff. I don't know theory. This does look like a move, but it looks like a move that worries me, in the sense that, like, having never studied this, my first impression would be, if I play this, what if he takes my knight? Because I have no pawns in the center as black. So I'm thinking to myself, what if he takes my knight and pushes and attacks my knight? Do I have anywhere good to jump into? And it's the same thing I ask myself when I play like the perk, or if you play any opening where you allow them to push e5 and kick your knight, you have to know if you where your knight's going and if that's a good thing or bad thing. So I would look at the squares and be like, okay, can't go here. It could go here because it will be supported by a pawn, but if he kicks it again, I'm gonna have to go to b6 like in the Alekhine's defense. Who knows, maybe he hunts it further, or maybe he just leaves it there because it's a misplaced piece. So that just doesn't look appealing to me. Now maybe it's theory, but just from like a principle standpoint, it does not look appealing to me, because I don't want my knight to end up on b6 while giving white e5 and c4 for free. And what's my knight doing here? It makes no sense to me. So another move that I would look at is definitely bishop c5. This move makes a lot more sense to me. Again, regardless of the theory, I'm developing this piece, which means that I know I'll always have this square for my knight, so I never have to worry about this if I want that square, and I won't be blocking my bishop. So this looks more appealing to me. White will go something like this probably to defend the knight. And then, like I said, I don't really want to put this here at any point because of the lines with e5 coming after trades. So if I want to put it on e7, something like queen attacks, c3, I don't know, knight e7, something like this. It looks more logical. And then put my pawn here and get the bishop out somewhere. Castle. And my pieces look fine. But you developed your knight, which is probably playable. It just looks really funky. And and your opponent takes the knight. Of course, you take back this way because you don't want to give the queen trade right in the beginning of the game. And now he'll probably kick your knight, which he does. You have to really go here because going home is just bad. So you do go here. He might kick the knight, and he does kick the knight. And this is what I was like, where does your knight go? I don't really like the squares. Like knight b6 is like the Alekhines, very reminiscent of it because they kick it with e5 and c4 pawns, just in the same fashion. But it's also kind of considered misplaced in that opening too. Because the thing I don't like about it is he has this b pawn that can just shut your knight down. So like you have pressure here, but it's not real. That's what I don't like, but let's see what happens. Okay, so, and the engine obviously is on the, wait, can we see it? Yeah, you guys can see it. Yeah, it's right there on the left. The game's even. It's obviously playable and may very well be theory, but from my human mind, the other variation with bishop c5 makes a lot more sense because look at this position compared to that one. Like the pieces there made a lot more sense, but okay, so let's see what you do. Okay, so you play bishop a6, which I like because it follows the principle of the least active piece. This bishop's already semi-developed, so you're developing your least active piece with a threat. But this whole idea looks so superficial to me because he has the ability to play b3, which he does. So although this is the best move, and although the engine says it's fine, this is 6 points of material that is completely useless because he has this b3 pawn. I made a speed run, or maybe it was a road to 200. I don't know. I made a video recently where I put my pieces on the side of the board, my knight and my bishop, to attack that exact pawn. But the difference in that video was his b pawn was on c3, and there were doubled pawns. So this pressure I had with my pieces, he couldn't defend it with pawns. He had to defend it with pieces. And then in that situation, your pieces become very effective, and they're doing a really nice job. But when it's defended by a pawn, they're not effective, and they're doing a terrible job. So I really don't like this variation so far. Okay, so black continues. So white goes b3 to reduce the pressure. It makes a lot of sense. And then Ryan sees that all the holes he's creating on the dark squares, he needs to develop, put it on an active square. So this makes a lot of sense. We like this move a lot. It prepares castling. That's a really good piece now, right? Okay, so white defends the knight that was hanging and puts it on a strong diagonal. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so Ryan castles. And so this is where I think it's super important to like realize what needs to be done in the position. And so castling is a normal move, and you definitely want to include it in your next 3 moves. But if I said what are 3 moves you want, like that you need to make in this position, I think you'll give me 2 of them, which are good. And then I think you're going to miss the third one completely, which is actually the essence behind the position that I feel like. And so if I ask you what are 2 moves, if you had, or 3 moves, if you had 3 free moves to make, I think one you would tell me is castle. One you might tell me is queen g5, which looks like, or maybe queen h4, one of these, which looks like an active developing move. But I'm not sure what you would tell me for the third, because you definitely did not play the third in the game. And okay, so let's see what you do. You castle. Now, between the 2 moves I just mentioned, castling and queen g5, I'm more inclined to go to something like queen g5. Not so much because of this pawn, which is more of a trap than anything with a bishop here. But it hampers his bishop's development, which is clearly what he wants to move next to castle, which is super annoying for him, and also stops his queen from coming here. Like if you just castle, what if his queen gets super active, and then now you can't go to these squares, and now you have to go to something dumb like, it's not dumb, e7 is a good square, but it's definitely not as active as these two. Okay, castling is definitely good, and it's definitely one of the 3 moves you should want to include. So I'm not going to hate on it too much. So let's continue. Okay, so he moves the bishop because the queen doesn't pressure that pawn. And now it's aiming at the king, and the most important defender of the king is gone, which is the knight. And that's why I don't like rerouting the knight to b6, because it doesn't belong there. It belongs on f6. Or at least somewhere by the king. Okay, so now, see, now you go queen g5, which is a great move it's a great move to want to make, because it comes with a double threat. You're connecting the rooks, you're developing your last piece maybe to its most active post. It's good. The only thing is, I think it's just like priorities are wrong. If all of your pieces were on good squares, queen g5 would definitely be the best move. But because these 2 pieces are absolutely garbage, and you're not realizing that, like, you should definitely be focusing on rerouting or somehow fixing the 6 points of material that's worth 0 points at the moment before doing anything else, like pawn hunting, which is only worth 1 pawn. If you win a pawn and your relative firepower goes up by 1, that's not as good as putting these pieces on perfect squares and your relative firepower go up by 6, because they're worth 0 even though they're on the board. So if you're thinking about this, the most important thing I need to do right now is not attack white, it's to fix these 2 pieces to complete my development. Moving your queen doesn't actually complete your development, because your queen is fine, it already has a diagonal. You need to fix these pieces or your development's not to actually complete, even if your rooks are connected. So if you're looking at it like that and you're like, well, what can I do? What do you want me to do about it? My knight can't move, right? What am I going to do? You want me to go to c8 in here? I'm not doing that. Fine, that's fair. And then you say, what do you want me to do with my bishop? Go home or go to b7 and push a pawn? That's ridiculous. I agree. Which is why your attention should 1000% be drawn to the move d5, because it strikes out at this pawn, and if he takes your pawn or you can take his pawn, and now he has a pawn here that's isolated, these pieces once again become amazing, because he only has piece defense, not pawn defense. So the only way to make these pieces good is to get in d5. Boom. This is what you really need to be like seeing about the position, and you nonchalantly left these pieces here. But if I said, like, what's their potential future, you couldn't possibly tell me anything other than playing d5 or d6 with the idea of rerouting the bishop back, because otherwise you're staring into this pawn chain permanently, indefinitely, and if that's your plan, obviously you're going to lose the game. So if you just look at this position, the engine says it's 0-0, but let's look at the pieces, right? These guys are shut down, staring into a pawn chain. This guy, I mean, it looks nice, but practically speaking, white's going to castle. There will be no pin. The knight's defended, and your bishop at any point can be kicked. It's not actually going to be doing anything, right? So you have 3 pieces, which are 2 are terrible, and one's like, okay, fine. And no protecting around the king. Look at white on the other hand. He's going to castle, so we'll pretend he's castled. He has this awesome bishop staring directly down a clean diagonal at your king. You have this other bishop also staring down an open diagonal, because as far as I'm concerned, this e5 pawn doesn't exist, because if I'm white, at any moment I'm sacking that pawn to open the diagonal. So it doesn't matter if the pawn's here or not. As far as I'm concerned, these are 2 open diagonals right at the king where there's no defense. I can bring my queen in, and I also have a knight that can jump into e4. Meanwhile, black's pieces are garbage, and you're going to get checkmated. So engine says it's 0, but if I just look at this position, my prediction is black's gonna get checkmated from here. And so that's the mind shift. It's not that you need to like see right now. It's not about the moves. You know, it's not about this move or that move. It's about looking at this position and realizing that even though the engine says equal, it's practically terrible for black if you don't play it perfectly. And to play it perfectly, you need to play d5. If you don't play d5, you're just much worse. And so you play a move that looks natural, but now you're down 6 points of material. If you take those pieces off the board, you would be like, oh, black's completely losing. Well, it's the same thing with them on the board, isn't it? You can't actually make a verbal argument that these pieces make any difference to the game on the board than off. So, okay, white castles, and now his position looks really powerful, a little scary. So now here, again, you need to play d5, but you take this pawn, which is insane. It's crazy. Okay, so not realizing that these pieces are like the complete problem is, I mean, you kind of should realize how bad they are at the very least, even if you're not sure how to fix them, right? But let's say you say, okay, I realize they're bad, but for some reason you don't realize that how d5 fixes them, or how it helps. Let's say you just skip that. You definitely, on the other end of the spectrum, have to see that taking this pawn cannot be good for your position, on the account of you're walking directly into this diagonal, this X-ray, and you're opening up the diagonal for his bishop into your king. So this pawn, yeah, you don't want it there to kick your knight, but now that it already kicked your knight, let's leave it here for the moment. Let's not take it with their queen and walk into rook e1 tempo and knight discoveries, because that's crazy. Because this position has nothing to do with this pawn. Your priority, even if you can take a free pawn, even if there's a pawn on like h4 right now, and you could just scoop it and not walk into discoveries, your mindset should not be, oh, I want to take pawns. It should be, oh man, I need to get these pieces in the game. Like, and that's what you were missing in this game, I feel like. I don't know what you were thinking, obviously. Maybe the whole time you were like, man, these pieces suck. I need to fix them, which would be great, but you didn't make any moves to fix them. So that's the problem. So yeah, if the whole point of d5 is again to break down this pawn chain so that your pieces are good. If he takes, that basically forces him to en passant, right? Because if the second you mess up his pawn chain, your pieces are amazing again. But if he en passants, now you're never harassing this pawn chain. It's permanent, and you're gonna have to reroute your bishop the other way. But so what? You need to get it in the game. Do what you gotta do, right? Okay, so you take the pawn, which is like suicide, because he has all these pieces. He's gonna bring in the rook with tempo, and it's as if these pieces don't even exist. So you're just down like 15 points of material. Okay, so he goes here with his queen, creating a battery and staring at your queen. This looks completely lost. The engine says it's 1.7, which I guess that means lost, but think of it like it's +4 for white. Because how are you going to stop all this pressure with no knight on f6 and your pieces over here? It makes no sense, right? This piece construction is only good in like the Nimzo when there are double pawns. Otherwise, you absolutely have to break down the chain. So I would move my queen here. I'm like, okay, this is hit. I'm staring at this. The most natural move has to be queen h5, getting out of the discoveries, getting out of rook e1, and protecting the pawn. But instead, Ryan, you got a little cheeky. You brought this back with a counter threat, which I like the idea, but I mean, as soon as you consider your opponent's response, you have to discount this move immediately, because, you know, if I'm white, I'm just going f5, f4. And thank you for the f4 pawn advance. And now your bishop, what's it doing here? Your queen has to move. You give some random check. I go safe in the corner. And now your pieces are just all in the wrong spots. But white doesn't do that. White goes g3, blunting the checkmate, which is also fine, but not as forcing because it doesn't hit the queen. Okay, again, the queen is in this diagonal and there's this threat, so the most natural move is queen h5, taking care of both. But you played h6, which it makes no sense because why are you leaving your queen here? You should instinctively want to get it off this diagonal, because now you have to calculate every single knight jump because the bishop's defended. So at any point he can go to any square and you have to calculate all of them because your queen's here. So it's really weird to me to leave your queen here. And I wouldn't even move my knight unless I could win material. I would just rook e1 you, and you're just making my position better for free. So, okay, so he knight e4s you, which is just as good because this bishop is severely misplaced. For this reason, because he's going to take it. You should have left it where it was for the time being and focused on these pieces again. Your bishop was fine. At the very least, it had pressure on a piece. It could trade if it needed. But now the queen is hit, and no matter where you go, he has tactics, weird stuff coming. So this is just lost. It looks completely lost to me. So you go back, maybe trying to stay in contact with the bishop and somewhat active. Yeah, but you're still on the E file. You can't stay in any of these lines. It's just not going to work. And if you think about it, h5, in addition to protecting your pawn, is one of the most out-of-the-way squares from his attacks before. So now he's x-raying your queen. And you try to stop it this way, but if he takes and you take, you're still in the line of sight. It's all very speculative. Also, he can move his knight and create pins. You're kind of creating tactics against yourself. But I guess you wanted to challenge his bishop. It's not this that's the mistake. It's everything before it. So like I'm not going to hate on this move. Now he plays this. And this allows you to take the bishop. And if he doesn't have any good knight discoveries, why do you do that? Okay, so you take the bishop, which is good. He's not utilizing the pin because he didn't move the knight. He's going to take back. And now notice your pieces are still worth 0. Not 6. 0. Okay. So you apply pressure here. Still leaving it in the x-ray, which is funny. Okay, so he goes here. Bit of an odd move. And now we get d6. Only when it turns out to be a blunder. What are the chances? But you know what? It's kind of your fault. Because, okay, when you're high enough rated, I do believe that you don't automatically move your queen out of pins. You calculate to see if they have good knight jumps. And sometimes you leave it there because you're high enough rated, you have the confidence, you know it can stay there. But you've literally been purposely inside this bishop thing, purposely inside this rook thing. You are refusing to get out of these discoveries. And so at some point, like I said, at some point you're going to not calculate every single legal move for the discovery, and you're going to mess up. So here it is. Now your 2000 rated opponent, who is calculating all his knight jumps, because on every turn he's trying to get that queen, trust me, because that's what I'd be doing. That's what every player would be doing, is trying to win the queen. He spots this with the undefended bishop, hitting the queen. And, oh, you resigned. So it's a 20 move game, and it seems like, well, development center. Development center. Force move. Force move. Force move. But just saying it like development, you know, just saying it that doesn't necessarily mean the position is good. Um, just conceptually, strategically, I don't like any of this because, and this is the most important thing you need to take away, is this, it's very simple. This knight here and this bishop here, they mean nothing once he goes b3. Like, once you're biting into the pawn chain, unless you can break down that pawn chain, and the only pawn break you would have to do that would be this d pawn on d5. So strategically, I don't like this. Now, the Nimzo Indian is based on this, these two pawns, the knight on a5 and the bishop on a6. But that's because they're doubled, and there's no pawn on b3. So that's why I really don't like this variation. So I would just recommend, I would say that it's not principled, because you're taking a knight that, from f6 and putting it on b6. And your king doesn't like that. So maybe next time, go for the bishop c5 line. Or if you do go for this line, again, I don't know theory, but if he takes and you take, and he pushes and you go here, and he pushes again, the way I would probably play this, not knowing theory, is bishop b4 check here, just to get a little speedier development than you did in the game. And then whatever he blocks with, well, he's going to put his block with his bishop, because otherwise you take his knight. So when he blocks his bishop, you just take it, right? And then you move your knight, and then you can castle, and you'll have taken his dark square bishop off the board, and that will be one less bishop beaming at your king. You know, like in the game, he had the bishop pair at your king. If you take away one of those bishops, that would make you feel a lot better. So I would definitely throw this move in, and I think this one little difference, you know, this one little train of thought, faster development, removing an attacker of my opponents because I don't have a knight on f6, so I definitely want to remove attackers. That general mind shift will help you in this position. He goes here, here, takes or something, knight b6. It'll be a similar position, like I said, but he's down an attacker, which is nice for you. And now you don't even have your bishop here, so maybe you can be more normal after your castle. Who knows? But like I said, bishop c5 variation is probably more natural. But you can look at the lines for yourself. Anyway, I hope this helps. The overarching theme is you did not appreciate the restriction of your pieces, piece activity above all else. Thank you for the submission. This was a fun one, and I learned something about the Scotch game. Goodbye.